Oh my God. So this is a big one. We have a solution for the 340 and it's real.
December 11th, 2020. The world is 9 months into a pandemic, and most people are sitting in their living rooms watching Tiger King for the third time, learning how to make sourdough, and debating whether a t-shirt around the face counted as a face mask.
It does.
In Annandale, Virginia, a software developer named David Orenchuk is sitting at his desk on a video call, staring at a cipher.
And he's not alone on that call. There's a mathematician named Sam Blake in Melbourne, Australia. It's already the next morning for him because that's how Australia works, always living in the future. And there's a Belgian programmer named Jarl van Eyck, who has built in his spare time, mind you, the most powerful cipher cracking software available to civilians. 3 people, 3 countries, 3 time zones, 3 brains bigger than mine.
And between them, on Jarl's computer screen, is a 340-character cipher that has been sitting unsolved since November 8th, 1969. The FBI tried, the NSA, and while they've never formally confirmed it, people who know things say they tried, with all of their I Spy software in tow. Cryptanalysis divisions, early computers, entire generations of hobbyists, academics, and obsessives. Real smart people have tried to tackle this cipher, and all of them had whiffed. 51 years, 1 month, and 3 days. Nobody could crack it.
Until one day, they crack it harder than a 3-year-old with an egg. So let's begin.
Sneaky footsteps in the night, clues that vanish out of sight. Grab your hat and magnifying glass. We'll talk this case and have a blast. Mugshot Mysteries, we're on the trail. Twists and turns that never fail. Laughs and chills, it's quite the show. Who did it? Tune in to know.
Welcome back to Mugshot Mysteries. I'm Kathryn.
And I'm Gabriel. And we are on part 3 of our Zodiac series. This one is called The Codebreakers. And before you picture a team of square-jawed, Schwarzenegger-looking government agents in a bunker somewhere, the Codebreakers in this episode are a software developer, a mathematician, a Belgian programmer, and a cartoonist with no law enforcement training. And finally, a detective with animal crackers in his jacket pocket. Forget about Vince Neil, baby. This here is a real motley crew.
Yep, what he said. Now in this episode, we're going to do 3 things. First, we're going to walk you through every single authenticated Zodiac communication chronologically, a complete record, because you, my dear, dear audience, deserve the full picture. And because the letters are the case, you have to have it. Now, second, we're going to go deep on the Z340 and what finally broke it open after half a century. And third, we're going to meet the people who spent years chasing this. Detective Dave Toschi, author Robert Graysmith, and the investigation apparatus that was, generously speaking, not exactly a well-oiled machine. We're talking it's burning oil like my 86 Thunderbird, and my daddy did take my T-Bird away, and I'm really sad about it.
The joys of your first cars. You know, I once had a car that had no 3rd gear. It had great air conditioning, though, so totally worth it.
Yeah, well, okay, but could yours only go in reverse as soon as you started the car? And if you didn't do it, then you're screwed.
No, but I once did drive a car that my uncle started and then said, don't turn that off because it's not going to start again.
Go.
Yeah, you got one try at this, kid. Make it the 45-mile drive.
Oh, wow. All right, then. So here's the quick recap if you're just joining us, or if a week has passed and your brain has just wandered onwards, like it does. The Zodiac Killer. Northern California, late 1960s. 5 confirmed dead, 2 survivors. He attacked couples at lovers' lanes. Wore a homemade executioner hood to one attack. Called police from payphones to report his own crimes. He was within walking distance of 2 uniformed officers after the last confirmed attack and was not stopped due to a dubious dispatch error we covered in part 1. And spoiler alert, they willy-nilly picked a whole different race when they sent the alert out to the police. And I stopped there because maybe he stops there with the murders. And because after he fancies himself an author and he picks up a pen and changes serial killer history. Because over 20 letters come in, 4 ciphers, a cross circle symbol that became one of the most recognized icons in American criminal history. And that, ladies and gentlemen, well, that's where we are today.
Fantastic recap.
Thank you.
Now, if any of that sounds familiar and interesting to you, it's because we covered it in parts 1 and 2. Go back and listen if you haven't. Look, we got nothing but time here. What you're listening to now is just floating in a cloud.
Now, before we go deep on the ciphers and the investigators, let's do something we haven't done yet in the series. Lay every authenticated Zodiac communication out in order, cleanly, so that you have the full picture. People are drawn to this case because of what this man wrote. So here it is, all of it, chronologically, the good and the bad, and the badly misspelled.
Think of it as the complete discography. We've played the hits in parts 1 and 2. Now, here's a full track list. Here's the director's cut. Here's the B-side.
Oh,
Here's the
man.
insufferable extended edition, except hopefully this is sufferable. July 31st, 1969, the opening move. 3 nearly identical letters arrive at the same time at 3 Bay Area newspapers: the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. Government-subsidized postal service showing their merits. Each contains 1/3, or 33%, of the Z408 cipher, plus a cover letter confessing to the Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs attacks with details only the perpetrator would know. Like the specific ammunition, what the victims were wearing. He demands the ciphers be published on the front page within 8 days, or he will, quote, go on a kill rampage.
Dun, dun, dun.
We've already covered how stupid kill rampage sounds.
Yes.
He does not name himself. There's no return address, just a cipher, a threat, and a cross-circle symbol, and a desperate need for attention. He coordinates at the same time the delivery to 3 newspapers like he's staging a product launch, which kind of is.
Now, August 7th, 1969, a follow-up letter to the Vallejo Times-Herald. The papers haven't published yet, and he's not interested in waiting. He threatens again. The papers publish the next day, and now the precedence is set. August 8th, 1969. Betty Hardin cracks a Z408 at her kitchen table in Salinas. Now, we've covered this. She figures the message starts with I because she knows narcissism when she sees it. Maybe a dig at her husband. We don't know, but she is right. The decoded message opens with, I like killing people because it is so much fun. Claims victims will become his slaves in the afterlife, and ends with 18 characters that have never been definitively decoded. The last 18 characters may be filler, they may be gibberish, and they may contain his name, but nobody has confirmed which it is.
Betty Hardin, by the way, has never gotten close to the credit she deserves. Not surprising. She did in 20 hours what every intelligence agency in the country couldn't do in 8 days. Given her expertise in narcissistic behavior, it probably came as no surprise to her that men don't like getting beat by girls.
Listen, I think we owe a round of applause to Betty, so insert round of applause sound here. You go, girl.
October 13, 1969, 3 days after Paul Stine's cab driver attack. A letter arrives at the Chronicle containing a swatch of Paul Stine's blood-stained shirt cut from a larger piece police already knew the attacker had. Proof of ownership. The letter also taunts the SFPD about the dispatch error that let him walk away from 2 officers. We know about that one. And then it includes a threat that caused genuine regional panic. School children make nice targets, he says. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off them kiddies as they come bouncing out.
I mean, his words. The kiddies. It just,
Yeah.
Rage.
Keep the kids out of it, asshole. He mailed bloody evidence to a newspaper. He dropped it off at the post office. Look, whether he got the insurance on the package is unknown.
Wow. That might be the first official wow. Bottoms up. Now, armed police officers began riding Bay Area school buses the next day like they've been held back a few decades. For weeks, patrol cars and aircraft followed bus routes. Yeah, aircraft. The region hadn't seen anything like it and arguably wouldn't again until after September 2001. He did that with one paragraph. Leave the kids and Brittany alone. Although maybe give Brittany some help. Sorry, she might need some help.
Yeah, you see the knife dance? Needs some help.
It's iconic though. All right, now, October 14th, 1969, a letter to the Vallejo Times-Herald with details about the Lake Berryessa attack on Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. The hood, the tying, the carving on the car door. He wants every attack recorded in his name. November 8th, 1969, one of the most significant mailings. The Chronicle receives a greeting card, a 340-character cipher, the Z340, and a handwritten diagram of what he calls the death machine, a bomb supposedly rigged to detonate under a school bus. And he writes, I get awfully lonely when I am ignored. So lonely, I could do my thing. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. I did say that 6 times because he put 6 exclamation points. So he really committed to those exclamation points, so I had to commit as well. English teachers everywhere are shuddering though.
Let me say it again. 6 exclamation points is the written equivalent of grabbing someone by the shoulders and shaking them like they're speaking in tongues. December 20th, 1969. This is exactly 1 year to the day after the Lake Herman Road attack. The letter goes not to a newspaper this time, but to celebrity attorney Melvin Belli. The tone changes completely. Dear Melvin, he says, this is a Zodiac speaking. I wish you a happy Christmas. He misspells Christmas, by the way. Hopefully, his Christmas list wasn't asking for cologne, because surely he wasn't spelling that right. Ask for help. He says something in him won't let him stop. He says he's afraid he'll lose control. Again, misspelled. And he includes another swatch of Paul Stine's shirt, because he is at the same time asking for help and providing evidence of a crime, which is an approach you don't see very often. Now, we covered this in part 2, whether it's genuine distress or absolute baloney is debated. April 20th, 1970, the Z13 arrives. This is 13 characters. It's prefaced with 3 words that have generated probably more frustration than any other 3 words in the history of American true crime. It says, my name is. The letter also includes a bomb diagram, but nobody is really focused on the bomb diagram because it looks ridiculous. 13 characters. My name is. Instant infatuation. Those 13 characters are going to get stalked harder than David Letterman.
Okay, I'm going to have to pause this and ask a question here. This is now our 3rd episode, and the My Name Is has come up, and every time I'm like, chicka chicka Slim Shady. And now, Slim, I'm looking at you. Did you steal that line from the Zodiac? I mean...
Or you just want to tell people he was Slim Shady?
I'm just saying, he has a box, like a manic box of just random thoughts that he's put in for his, like, lyrics.
Everybody, she is both a Swiftie and a Slim Shady.
Yes.
Yeah. What do they call you, Shadies?
I have no idea. Just, I have split personality. So, all right, I just had to have that moment. We'll carry on. So, back to his My Name Is. He knew exactly what he was doing with those 3 words. He was lighting a fuse that would burn for literal decades, 50 plus years later, and we're still standing here watching it burn like a Tortino pizza roll. And those aren't actually that good.
No.
They're not.
They're very disappointing.
They are.
It's just sauce.
Yeah.
Don't eat them. They're just going to burn a hole in your mouth.
Waste of time. Same with bagel bites. June 26, 1970, the Z32. 32 characters accompanied by a hand-drawn map of the San Francisco Bay with a cross-circle symbol over Mount Diablo. He tells readers to use the map as a cipher key. Now, no one has officially confirmed a solution until AI finally gets its collective shit together, so let's go, Claude. Don't let Van Damme get the best of you. July 24th and 26th, 1970. 2 letters in rapid succession. He's angry. Nobody is wearing the Zodiac buttons that he demanded. And yes, he demanded that civilians wear buttons with his cross-circle symbol with perhaps a straightish face, as though this were a brand launch. He claims to have punished the public by shooting a man in a parked car. He also parodies a song from The Mikado, a Victorian comic opera by Gilbert and Sullivan, which is a detail that sounds like a man overcompensating for spelling Christmas wrong. But he updates his score to Zodiac equals 13, SFPD equals 0.
Yeah, escalated quickly.
A little bit.
Now, he had a merch line. He demanded people wear his merch. When they didn't, he committed an act of violence as retaliation. That is perhaps the 100,000th most unhinged influence behavior in recorded history. October 27th, 1970, the Halloween card. And this is sent to Paul Avery, the Chronicle reporter who had connected the Zodiac to a 1966 attack in Riverside. The card is signed, "From your secret pal." Inside, in the Zodiac's handwriting, "Peekaboo, you are doomed," with a skeleton and cross-circled eyes. This is the first time he targets a specific named individual rather than a general public. Lucky Mr. Avery. March 1971, a postcard to the Los Angeles Times. Now, he's branching out geographically. He writes, "I'm crack-proof," which, good for him, is a bad habit. He references the disappearance of Tahoe area nurse named Donna Lass, and this is from September 1970, suggesting involvement. Now, her body sadly was never recovered, but he may have just wanted credit after he read about it himself.
Now, January 29th, 1974, the final confirmed authentic Zodiac letter sent to the Chronicle. Now, the tone has shifted again. It's less threatening and almost casual. He praises The Exorcist, calling it the best satirical comedy that I have ever seen, which is a sentence. Most people just think the crab walk is terrifying.
It is very terrifying.
He includes a verse from Titwillow, another Gilbert and Sullivan song, to show he's totally smart. He updates his score to 37. And then, with no announcement, no goodbye, no dramatic closing statement, he simply stops and turns off the lights like he's Sam Malone.
Yeah, there's no farewell tour, just the letter about The Exorcist, and then curtains, everyone. It is truly one of the strangest endings to one of the strangest communication records in criminal history. Look, J.D. Salinger has nothing on it.
Now, that's the complete authenticated record. Roughly 15 confirmed communications spanning 4.5 years to multiple newspapers, one attorney, and one specific journalist. Each one deliberate, each one controlled. And 2 of those 4 ciphers still have not been officially solved. Which brings us to the one that took the life of a middle-aged man to crack, 51 years to be exact. Now, when the Z340 arrives in November 1969, the FBI's cryptanalysis unit gets involved quickly, and quickly hits a wall like a middle-aged man in a Corvette, because the Z340 is not a harder version of the Z408. It's a different machine entirely. This is the T800 versus liquid metal.
T800 wins with perseverance every time. So the Z408 was, as we discussed before, the somewhat unfortunately named homophonic substitution cipher. Each symbol represents a letter, and some letters have multiple symbols, which makes pattern recognition harder. But the underlying logic still a one-to-one replacement. So you swap one thing for another, you find the pattern, and you work backwards. A trained codebreaker, not me, with enough time and a cargo ship of patience can eventually crack that mechanically. It's kind of like brute force in it.
Now, the Z340 has the substitution layer, but it also has a second layer that nobody recognized for decades. When researchers finally decoded it, they found that the symbols weren't just substituted, they were also transposed. The Zodiac had arranged the characters in a diagonal pattern across a grid, so the cipher had to be read at an angle before the substitution could even begin. It's like being handed a word scramble, but first you have to figure out that the letters are written in a spiral.
Here's a fun fact.
Okay.
Researchers who analyze the solution believe the Zodiac may not have intentionally made the Z340 this hard. The interaction between his substitution choices and the transposition pattern created a cipher more complex than what he probably originally designed. He may have accidentally created something he did not intend. This was like finding a week-old mushroom pizza and finding out you discovered penicillin. He stumbled into 51 years of unsolvability without fully understanding what he made. It was a cipher version of Frankenstein's monster mixed perhaps with a bit of serial killing. So actually Frankenstein's monster.
Wow. Okay. All right. which means the Z340 defeated every intelligence apparatus in the country, partly because of a mistake its author didn't even know he'd made. There's a very particular flavor of irony in that.
Again, the FBI's people worked it. People who know things say the NSA tried. Early computers in the 1980s, they tried their hardest, all 512 kilobytes of RAM of them. Internet forums have tried. And all of them hit the same wall because none of them had the right combination of computing power, the right software, and well, this part matters a lot, they didn't have the right insight about which direction to read the damn thing. They needed Will Hunting on the case. Or, a programmer, a mathematician, and a software engineer. They do just fine too.
This sounds like a great trio. David Ornchak had been working on the Z340 for years before December 2020. I mean, not as a job. He has a career, software development. This is what he does with the parts of his brain that his career doesn't use. Because when your brain is a certain size, you can part it out to other subjects. He built a dedicated website documenting every proposed Z340 solution, every failed attempt, every theory that had been tried and abandoned. He corresponded with researchers around the world. He became, by any reasonable definition, an authority on a cipher that he couldn't crack.
He connected with Sam Blake in Melbourne, and that's our Australian time traveler, a mathematician who approached the problem statistically this time. And he's looking for underlying structures that would reveal the transposition. And with the help of Jarl van Eyck in Belgium, who had built AZ Decrypt, which is a cipher analysis tool he had named, yes, for the Zodiac. These are not government contractors. They are not getting paid. They're just three people who decided that they were obsessed with this, like a young me was obsessed with Kelly LeBrock.
Really?
Just so beautiful.
Okay. Well, Sam Blake runs a test on the symbol arrangement, and he theorizes a diagonal reading pattern across the grid, that you have to read the cipher at an angle, not straight across. He feeds his approach into AZ Decrypt, and the characters start to resolve like an apparatus. He gets on a call with Ornchak and with Van Eyck, and they run it together. And in December 2020, for the first time in 51 years, the Z340 begins to speak like someone who is coming out of a coma.
Presumably, there was probably many high-pitched squeals to delight.
They have high-pitched squeals?
I mean, when you're very excited, even if you have a deep voice, sometimes it's a high-pitched squeal.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't control it.
All right.
Yeah. Now, the decoded message reads, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me." And then it continues, "That wasn't me on the TV show," which brings up a point about that. "I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise." He's referencing the fake caller on the live television show that we covered in part 2. That was a guy who claimed to be the Zodiac, but who was actually a psychiatric patient on his 15-minute break named Eric Well. The Zodiac is correcting the record. Even after 50 years, this man wants credit for the right crimes, even though he seemed to also want credit for crimes he didn't commit. No one says serial murderers can't be contradictions.
Now the cipher continues. All the fools from the police and the sheriffs who have not been able to do it, to catch me. By the way, have you cracked the last cipher I sent you? My name is... And then it ends. No name. 51 years of waiting. A team of 3 international civilians finally break it open and even decode it. The Zodiac gives us nothing.
They obviously wanted a name.
Yes.
And what they got was just more taunting. And ironically, that taunting was most likely meant to be decoded, back when Soul Train was still going strong.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI confirmed their solution by email, not a press conference, not a public announcement with handshakes and cameras and bikini-clad ladies. Just an email. 3 people who had just solved the most famous unsolved cipher in American history found out about it the way, I guess, you get a confirmation on your Amazon order.
What the decoded Z340 tells us when you read it now is that he was taunting from the inside out. I hope you are having lots of fun trying to catch me. He built a 51-year puzzle to deliver more mockery. He wasn't confessing. He wasn't helping. He was playing. The Z340 is not a clue. It's a middle finger with a 51-year jack-in-the-box timer.
And the thing he actually claimed contained his name was a completely different cipher, a much shorter one. Now, why he would put something so short attached to his name seems like an omission to me. So let's talk Z13 and Z32. 13 characters. Just 13. And 3 words in front of them. My name is. If the Z13 contains what the Zodiac says it contains, his real identity has been sitting in plain view on a single line since April 1970. And in 56 years, nobody has confirmed what it says.
The Z13's problem is the exact opposite of the Z340's problem. The Z340 was too complex, too much going on, not enough computing power to untangle it for 5 decades. The Z13 is too short. There's not enough data. A 13-character cipher with no confirmed encryption key can theoretically be decoded into thousands of different combinations depending on what substitution pattern you apply. It can be made to say almost anything if you try hard enough and aren't too worried about rigor.
Multiple proposed solutions exist. Some researchers have mapped the cipher pointing towards author Lee Allen, who we'll get more into in part 4. Others have worked it into Larry Kane, pointing to Lawrence Kane, another suspect. We'll talk about that more shortly. Neither solution has been confirmed, but they're all rather, for a lack of a better description, or just because I think it's funny, they're all pretty freaking white names, which would match our suspect's description.
An accurate description.
Stocky and white. And because the cipher is so short, there's no mathematical framework that can definitively eliminate options. You can't prove a 13-character solution right. You can't prove it wrong. There's a certain biblical truth to this. You can make of the ciphers what you wish. Choose to believe one thing or the other. You gotta have faith. Any song, Kathryn?
Baby. Yeah. I can't. I will go off on that one.
Mr. Michaels, you did it well.
All right. Well, if we're talking faith, going back to Larry Kane in 2024, a French engineer named Faisal Zarawi published a claim that he'd solved both the Z13 and the Z32 using the same encryption key that Oranchuk, Blake, and Van Eyck had established with the Z340. Now, his Z13 solution spells out a name that does not match either of the major suspects who have dominated the conversation for 50 years. It translates, according to him, to Z-A-Y-R, which he interprets as a reference to Lawrence K., often spelt Kane, a suspect who lived in South Lake Tahoe and was active in the area where the Zodiac sent letters. Now, his solution has not been confirmed by the FBI.
His proposed Z32 solution, however, is the one that generated more immediate interest. The Z32 was that 32-character cipher that came with the Mount Diablo map in June of 1970. Zarawi's solution produces geographic coordinates near a school in South Lake Tahoe, which connects directly to 2 things. The Zodiac school bus threats, his fantastical bomb design, and the 1970 disappearance of a nurse named Donna Lass. The Zodiac references Donna Lass in the 1971 postcard. Her body was never found. If Zarawi is right, the Z32 may be telling us where something was left. Law enforcement has not confirmed the solution. And without that confirmation, it does remain one of the more tantalizing threads in a case built almost entirely on mysteries.
So the short ciphers, when you look at the full arc of the communication record, feel intentional in their infuriating design. He didn't make them short because he ran out of things to say. He made them short because he understood that 13 characters and "my name is" would generate more obsession than a 13-page confession. And he was right. The Z340 could be cracked, given enough time and computing power because it's large enough to have a detectable pattern. The Z13 essentially cannot be cracked by conventional means. It's too small to have a provable pattern and too loaded with significance to walk away from.
The unsolvable ciphers aren't failures of the game, like the Z340, which was probably unintentionally difficult to crack, like when you tighten your shorts and just make a huge knot. And these are, however, very intentional. He designed puzzles that would outlast him, outlast the investigators, outlast the technology, and they're still pulling people in half a century later. They're arguing on internet forums like alien truthers. That's not encryption. That's intention. He built something that was going to stand regardless of what happened to him. This was his sarcophagus, and no one has found where this sandy body is buried.
Now, the ciphers are one part of why this case has never closed. But the other part, and the part that does need credit, is that the investigation itself was built on a foundation of structural problems that no individual detective, no matter how dedicated, could fully overcome. And the people who tried paid for it in ways that had nothing to do with the Zodiac.
Now, let's go over a little bit about the jurisdictional disasters. 4 different law enforcement agencies worked what was essentially the same case. Solano County Sheriff, Vallejo Police Department, Napa County Sheriff, and finally the San Francisco Police Department. In 1969, coordination between agencies meant phone calls, physical mail, occasional in-person meeting. There was no unified database. There's no shared digital evidence system because guess what? There's no digital anything. No single agency had jurisdiction over the full case. In short, it was a fucking mess.
Yes. Now, the Zodiac attacked in different counties, and whether that was deliberately tactical or just how the geography works, the effect was the same. The agencies were working pieces of the same puzzle and didn't always know what the other pieces said. One place had Boardwalk, and the other place had Park Place. And as we know, no one is getting that 2K without them coming together.
You did not make friends. You did not make friends owning Boardwalk.
Hell no.
Now, evidence was handled differently in each jurisdiction. You can see the problem there. Chain of custody wasn't always clean or consistent, and that means basically the analysis of evidence was more of a crackerjack box of differing techniques. Fingerprints lifted from the letters in one county weren't always matched against prints collected in another, which, as you can tell, is an issue. There were actual disagreements between agencies early on about whether they were dealing with the same guy even. The cross circle carved on Brian Hartnell's car door at Lake Berryessa wasn't even immediately connected to the cross circle symbol in the letters by everyone who needed to freaking connect them.
And the dispatch error from the Paul Stine attack is a great example of how that system failure worked in the Zodiac's favor. Officers Fulk and Zelms were told to look for a black male suspect when the Zodiac was a white man. They walked right past him on the street. Now, this isn't entirely the fault of the 2 individual officers making a bad call. This is a broken information chain at the dispatch level, and it cost the investigation its best real-world opportunity at getting this man. The Zodiac didn't escape because he was clever. He escaped because of sheer dumb luck. I'm still very upset about this.
By the time the agencies reached a functional level of coordination, the Zodiac had gone quiet. The evidence that remained, partial fingerprints, handwriting samples, DNA extracted from stamps and envelope flaps, they all were degraded. They're contaminated in some cases and limited by technology available at the time. There was no CODIS. There was no genetic genealogy. Sorry, Kathryn. There was no way to run a partial DNA profile through a national ancestry database, which, by the way, maybe don't do Ancestry if you plan to murder anyone, folks. What they had was handwriting analysis, physical descriptions from survivors, and composite sketches that were never definitively matched.
Also, maybe be wary of any family members that have already done their Ancestry because we can still get your ass if they've done it. I'm just saying.
So then you have to kill them first.
Anyway, and right at the center of all of that dysfunction was one man who refused to stop, who built the case file larger than any other investigator, who made the Zodiac his entire professional identity, for better and very much for worse.
His name was Dave Toschi. And if you've seen the David Fincher film and remember the detective who carried animal crackers in his pocket and could somehow make a bow tie look intimidating, that's him. Except the real version was probably even more of an exaggeration.
Now, Dave Toschi was an SFPD homicide detective assigned to the Zodiac case after the Paul Stine attack in October 1969. He became the public face of the investigation, and he is, by any measure, one of the more genuinely strange figures in the history of American law enforcement. Maybe not in a concerning way, or maybe a little bit of a concerning way, but let's just say this man marched to a drumbeat only him and those animal crackers could hear.
Again, this man wore bow ties all the time. That was his thing. He wore clip-on shoulder holsters instead of regular holsters because he believed they were faster on the draw, which I don't know how many gunfights he expected to get in. And I'm not a gun person, but I don't think that's really a thing. He kept a bag of animal crackers in his jacket pocket at all times, which, again, I am not a girl, but probably a red flag, Kathryn.
That's fucking weird.
Or maybe an endearing OCD habit.
No.
It just really depends on how good looking he was. Now, either way.
How rich he was.
And good looking, yes. Either way, he'd eat at crime scenes, at his desk, during interviews. I assume when he had a cigarette after doing the deed. He drove a Mustang. He was, by accounts of people who knew him, genuinely larger than life. The kind of cop who doesn't need to rely on a thick mustache to get some respect.
And he inspired 2 iconic fictional detectives in the same 3-year window. Steve McQueen modeled Bullet on Toschi. The film came out in 1968. And then, in 1971, Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood's gruff San Francisco homicide detective who operates by his own rules, and those rules are every criminal must make his day or be blown away. Now, that character was also partially drawn from Toschi. One real detective became the inspiration for 2 of the most famous fictional cops in American cinema. This while simultaneously working on one of the most famous active serial cases in the country. It was kind of a big deal. He probably had many leather-bound books, and his apartment definitely smelled of rich mahogany.
He was also deeply obsessed. 8 filing cabinets. That is the number of filing cabinets Dave Toschi filled with Zodiac materials. These were suspects, letter analysis, evidence logs, theories, timelines, correspondence with other investigators. 8 cabinets worth for one case. This is admirable and greatly concerning in a work-life balance kind of way. This was a guy who probably had a lot of unused vacation time.
Now, his prime suspect was Arthur Lee Allen. Allen was a convicted child abuser, a former school teacher, and a man who made alarming statements to acquaintances about the Zodiac killings that were, in retrospect, not the kind of thing an innocent person typically says. He owned a dive watch with a brand called Zodiac on the face. He had access to a trailer near the Berryessa area, and his handwriting was analyzed, and some experts found similarities to the Zodiac letters. But again, others didn't.
Toschi pursued Allen with absolutely everything he had for years. Multiple searches of his property, interviews, pressure. Allen consistently denied involvement, and despite the circumstantial weight of all this evidence, nothing conclusive was ever produced. Fingerprints taken from Allen didn't match the prints from the letters. DNA wasn't available in a way that it really needed to be at the time. Handwriting experts, they're divided. The case on Allen was built on inference and alignment and really a whole lot of obsession.
And Allen died in 1992 before genetic genealogy could have potentially closed the loop. His part is Part 4's territory, so we'll save the full breakdown for then. But the point and context of what it did do to Toschi is that he spent the better part of a decade certain he knew who the Zodiac was, unable to prove it, and watching the case stay open.
And then in 1978, something happened that ended Toschi's role in the investigation in a way that is, depending on your perspective, either deeply sad or genuinely baffling. I don't think you'll be able to guess. Anonymous fan letters started arriving at San Francisco Chronicle. These letters praise the work of Detective Dave Toschi on the Zodiac case. He was dedicated, they said. They said he was San Francisco's best hope for resolution. Wrote admiringly about his persistence and skill.
Yeah, well, they were written by Dave Toschi. He had anonymously submitted fan mail about himself to the newspaper covering the case he devoted a decade to. And when this was discovered, he was pulled from the Zodiac investigation and reassigned to general duties. He was never formally disciplined further, but his involvement in the case was over.
I think there's something in this that's easy to make a joke about.
Yeah?
And it is objectively a strange thing to do. But there's also something genuinely sad about it.
Yeah.
This is a man who gave years to a case that never gave back. He built 8 filing cabinets of evidence that never resulted in an arrest. Who was certain he was right and he just couldn't prove it? And somewhere in there, he needs someone to say he was doing a good job. This sounds like a really bad marriage, and it most certainly was. At the end of the day, the only person he could get love from was himself. Look, everyone, give compliments, Guys need them too. I personally remember all 5 or 6 I've gotten in my life.
Let me just go, screw you. I give you compliments all the time, okay? And also, you cook for me, so you don't bite the hand that feeds. That is a rule. He does cook for me. He's a really good cook.
Yeah, you do give compliments.
I do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're 4 of the 6.
This man. Well, at the end of the day, the Zodiac didn't confront Toschi or give him compliments, and he didn't threaten him. He didn't send him a Halloween card like he did with Paul Avery. He just stayed unsolved year after year until Toschi couldn't handle it and needed some recognition. And the best way he knew how was to send himself fan mail. Toschi wasn't the only person the case took apart from the inside. Across town, in the same Chronicle newsroom where the Zodiac's letters had been arriving since 1969, a man without a badge or a jurisdiction had been collecting his own version of those 8 filing cabinets. And he didn't have the law behind him. He had a notebook, an obsession, and eventually, a book deal.
Let us talk about Robert Graysmith. Now, he's a political cartoonist at the San Francisco Chronicle. Not a crime reporter. He's not a detective. He's a cartoonist. Not to downplay the job of a cartoonist, which though might be as niche as maybe a mime. He was sitting at his desk in the Chronicle newsroom on days when the Zodiac letters arrived. He was watching the reporters scramble. He was watching the investigation spin along. And he was finding that he couldn't stop thinking about it. He wanted to get involved like a little brother.
Now he started collecting clippings, photocopies of documents, notes from conversations with investigators, timelines he drew himself, suspect lists that he had maintained privately. He had a particular kind of mind, the kind that sees patterns, that treats an open question as a personal affront, that cannot file something under unresolved and then just move on. The Zodiac case became his second job, and then it became his first job, and then it became most of his life.
His 1986 book, simply called Zodiac, is kind of the foundational text of the case for most people. It's where the general public's understanding of the primary suspects, particularly author Lee Allen, this is where it comes from. It's a source that shaped the conversation for decades. And it's also by the standards of really serious Zodiac researchers. And there's many of those on Facebook and also real experts. This is genuinely controversial.
The criticism goes like this. Graysmith was not a neutral investigator. He reached a conclusion. Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac, and then organized his book around that conclusion. Now, some researchers argue that Zodiac presents speculation as established fact, that it builds circumstantial connections more firmly than the evidence actually supports, and that it directed so much public and investigative attention towards Allen that other potentially viable suspects were underexamined for decades.
Whether or not that critique is fully fair, it's true that Graysmith's framework became the dominant public narrative, which means that for 30 plus years after 1986, most people who thought about the Zodiac case thought about it in terms Graysmith established. Now, that's a huge amount of influence for a cartoonist with a notebook and a little brother complex.
Now, the 2007 David Fincher film uses Graysmith's book as its spine. Jake Gyllenhaal plays Graysmith. Robert Downey Jr. plays Paul Avery, the Chronicle reporter who got the Halloween card. Mark Ruffalo plays Toschi, and the film is meticulous. Fincher researched it obsessively. The period detail is extraordinary, and the atmosphere of a city living under the threat of something that can't be named is better captured than in probably any other true crime film made. It's genuinely great cinema.
And it is structurally Graysmith's version. The film ends without any type of resolution, with Graysmith still staring at photographs, still certain, still unable to prove it, which is where his actual life ended up. His marriage did not survive the obsession because, again, work-life balance and the Zodiac case don't seem to exist. He wrote a second Zodiac book in 2002. He gave years to a case that never gave him anything back, maybe a little bit of money. But it certainly was never a definitive answer. It literally was a mistress that kept him dangling.
Now, there's a through line connecting Avery, Toschi, and Graysmith that I think is worth naming outright. All 3 of them got close to this case. All 3 of them paid for it. Avery received a personal death threat, started carrying a gun, and his career declined until he died in 2000. Toschi spent a decade building an unsolvable case file and eventually compromised himself trying to manage the psychological weight of it. Graysmith gave up his marriage and most of his adult life to a book about a man who was never identified. And the Zodiac didn't have to do anything to these people. He just had to stay unsolved. And the case did the rest.
The Zodiac built something that would keep performing long after he stopped. He didn't need to keep operating to keep generating damage. He just needed to have created something that people couldn't walk away from. And we'll say he succeeded with flying colors. And the evidence of that success is not just the unsolved case file. It's literally Paul Avery's declining years and Dave Tosky's 8 filing cabinets and fake letters and Robert Graysmith's broken marriage. The performance is still running, and we sit here today talking about it, trying to be good actors, we hope.
Now, the case is officially open in multiple California jurisdictions as of 2026. The primary suspects are dead. Arthur Lee Allen died in 1992. Lawrence Kane died in 2010. Now, the physical evidence exists, but its condition after more than 51 years is the core problem.
DNA was extracted from the stamps and envelope flaps of the Zodiac letters. A partial profile has been developed. It's just not sufficient to run through CODIS with any kind of confidence. There simply isn't enough genetic material, and what exists has degraded over 50 years. Genetic genealogy, the technique that identified the Golden State Killer in 2018, it hasn't cracked this case because D'Angelo's sample was cleaner and more recent than what the Zodiac left behind.
Fingerprints were recovered from the Paul Stine cab and from the letters. Now, they don't definitively match any confirmed suspect. Some researchers believe the Zodiac deliberately smudged his prints before sealing the envelopes. I mean, he was clearly thoughtful enough to use gloves at the crime scenes and wear a costume to one attack and call from a payphone rather than traceable landlines. Assuming he was careless about fingerprints on letters would be inconsistent with everything else we know about how he operated.
In 2025, in a very, very recent development, it emerged that one figure that could be connected to this whole thing is the Black Dahlia case. If that connection is substantiated, it would significantly reframe the geographic scope of these crimes. We are going to cover that in full in part 4 because guess what? It deserves the room. It's fresh, it's definitely contested, but it changes things if it holds up. But the short version is, this case is not as dormant as the age suggests.
Forensic technology is moving faster than it ever has, and genetic genealogy databases are growing every month as more people submit consumer DNA tests. There is a plausible scenario in which a partial match to the Zodiac's DNA profile surfaces through ancestry databases, and a genealogist starts building backwards, which is exactly how the Golden State Killer was identified after decades of nothing. The scenario is not guaranteed, but it's not impossible.
There is also a counter-argument, like always, which is that the window just may be closing regardless of the technological advances. The Zodiac was probably born between 1930 and 1950 based on all the physical descriptions. If he's still alive, which grows less likely every year, he's old as hell. And I mean, sorry for people in their 80s or 90s. I know you're not really our demographic, but if you are not old as hell. But with that, the people who knew his primary suspects personally, they're all aging out. Institutional memory from the original investigation is fading. The DNA sample degrades incrementally with every year that passes. Every year this stays open, the probability of a definitive resolution goes down, and it goes down slightly.
And yet, the Zodiac Killer Project, a 2025 SXSW documentary, introduced new material. Researchers are still active and the forums are still full. The FBI case file is still technically opened, and somewhere, the Z13 is still waiting to be read correctly, or is designed so it never will be. 57 years in, and this case has outlasted the people who worked it, the technology of its era, and every deadline anyone has set for its resolution. It shows no signs of closing on its own. Now, part 4 is the finale. And it's finally time to look at the names, the actual suspects, the people who were close enough to the profile, the evidence, or the geography that investigators took them seriously, some for decades.
Arthur Lee Allen, Lawrence Kane, the man who might be visible in a 1969 yearbook photograph, the 2025 development connecting this case to a crime that happened 20 years before the Zodiac even picked up a pen, and the question that's been underneath everything since part 1. Does it actually matter if we find out who he was? If someone named him tomorrow, definitively and provably, would anything actually change? Or did the Zodiac win the moment we couldn't stop looking? Or does naming him take something away from him that he can't get back?
Now, part 4 is where we finally get to the names, which if you've been yelling at your phone for 3 episodes asking who did it, well, this one's going to be for you. Follow the show wherever you listen so you don't miss it when it drops, and find us at Mugshot Mysteries Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. And if you've been enjoying the series, go give us 5 stars and drop a comment. The Zodiac wrote 20 letters, you can manage 1. But before we go, as always, Gabriel, what did we learn today?
We have learned that if you think you are smart, there is someone smarter than you. And in their free time, they like to crack 50-year-old cold cases during a time when you couldn't order a Happy Meal without hand sanitizer. We have learned that carrying animal crackers in your shirt is probably not the shirt dropper you might assume it is. We have learned that ciphers are really hard to crack, and when they are finished, are most likely to give you metaphorical blue balls with what you've learned. We have learned that obsession can manifest in many ways, and that when it comes down to it, the same weird fascination that drives serial killers also drives those tracking them down. And finally, we have learned that it took 51 years to crack a cipher. It contained nothing useful and ended with the words, "My name is dash," which is just an amazing troll move before we even had a word for it.
Sneaky footsteps in the night, clues that vanish out of sight. Grab your hat and magnifying glass. We'll talk this case and have a blast. Mugshot Mysteries, we're on the trail. Twists and turns that never fail. Laughs and chills, it's quite the show. Who did it? Tune in to know. Gem, a secret note, a shady figure in a trench coat. The clock is ticking, the plot gets thick. We'll crack this puzzle quick as a click. Mugshot Mysteries, we're on the trail. Twists and turns that never fail. Laughs and chills, it's quite the show. Who did it? Tune in to know. Breadcrumbs through the haze. Every clue's a piece in this crazy